It is most unfortunate that Minister Louis Farrakhan has been labeled as a bigot by the mainstream media. As the leader of one of the most transformative social justice organizations in America, his opinions are routinely scrutinized by the press to find any signs of insensitivity. It is of no small consequence that the Southern Poverty Law Center has even labeled the Nation of Islam, which is a religious organization, as a hate group. I find it interesting that the Mormons actually taught that black people don't have a soul, and yet they've never been classified as a hate group. The Mormons have never actually even been in a discussion of being classified as a hate group. The fierce opposition to racial inequality and injustice that the nation has been famous for has always seemed to have elicited this strong opposition to their organization. Some of the nation's most prolific thinkers and eloquent orators are Malcolm X, Minister Louis Farrakhan, and Khalid Muhammad, who have all been highly critical of racism in the American society, and they have also exposed systemic inequality. I mentioned this brief synopsis of the Nation of Islam because the association with the nation has garnered negative press for practically every celebrity they have made alliances with. I believe this is because of the unfair classification of the nation as a hate group. Now, Khalid Muhammad, which was formerly the national spokesman of the Nation of Islam, was labeled as a bigot by the mainstream media. And I believe he was labeled as a bigot because the modern day Israelites, according to him, were newcomers to the Jewish paradigm. Brother Khalid's exact words were that the Jews were Johnny-come-lately Jews, which was very unsettling to Jewish scholars. He held a series of debates with rabbis, Christian clergy, about matters pertaining to slavery and religion. He was highly critical of modern-day Israelites because Jews have historically played a significant role in the slave trade. Several slave ships were actually found to have been owned by slave dealers who are of Jewish origin, and this has been outlined in a publication from the Nation of Islam called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews. This publication is actually reviled by Jewish scholars and denounced as inaccurate, despite the fact that the sources of the publication are predominantly Jewish scholars. Now, I would like to actually read an excerpt from this publication for the benefit of my subscribers. And according to this text, the title is Jews and the African Slave Trade. This is one section of the publication. And it says, throughout the history of the practice, Jews have been involved in the purchase and sale of human beings. This fact is confirmed by their own scholars and historians. In his book, A History of the Jews, Solomon Grazel writes that Jews were among the most important slave dealers in European society. Lady Magnus writes that in the Middle Ages, the principal purchasers of slaves were found among the Jews. And it continues by saying, they seem to be always and everywhere at hand to buy, and have the means readily to pay. Henry L. Feingold stated that the Jews who were frequently found at the heart of commerce could not have failed to contribute to the proportionate share to the slave trade, directly or indirectly. In 1460, when Jews were the masters of the nautical sciences in Portugal, that nation was importing 700 to 800 slaves yearly. The success of these medieval merchants was enhanced by their supreme linguistic abilities. And they continue talking about the various languages that they speak: Arabic, Persian, Roman, Frankish, Spanish, Slavonic, etc. And so basically, family, I want to make a connection between this paradigm and, as I mentioned earlier, the publication called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews was considered to be very incendiary by Jewish scholars and by the mainstream media. And so anybody who has actually been associated with the Nation of Islam has been saddled with this belief that the nation is anti-Semitic, and so anybody associated with the nation is anti-Semitic. All right. Now, the group called Public Enemy was one of the first groups to actually publicly side with Khalid Muhammad. All right, I believe Khalid Muhammad did the intro for one of the tracks on their album, where he actually basically gave a speech about the black community, and so Professor Griff basically left the group, but he's always held on to his beliefs. Previously, Professor Griff was a member of the Nation of Islam, and he's since come out and said that he's no longer a part of it, and he's now criticizing it. But he largely maintained the bulk of his views pertaining to black consciousness, and some of the views that he had pertain to blacks actually being the original Jews, right? And there's numerous documentation about the Jewish heritage of the Igbo of Nigeria, as well as the Jewish heritage of Beta Israel, who are located in Ethiopia. There's also a small contingent of black people from America who migrated to Israel and actually formed a community called Demona. Alright, now apparently in the Demona community, black people are actually being forced to become recircumcised because they don't believe that their traditions were a full representation of the Jews' standard of circumcision. Alright, and also many of the people from Demona are drafted to the military more readily and more easily than members of the wider community in Israel. And so many people think that black people from Demona are actually being sent to the front lines more frequently than the larger community of Israel. All right, and so there's many things of this nature that give the impression that the people in Israel do not have a high regard for people of African descent. All right, because there's also reports that the people from Ethiopia that are of Jewish heritage are also being made to be recircumcised upon entry into Israel. So many people are wondering if the people of Israel actually have any respect for people of African descent, knowing that these barbaric practices are being carried out. All right. Well, basically, Nick Cannon was the victim of an organized campaign to destroy his reputation after he made several claims that black people were the original Jews. All right. He actually had Professor Griff on his station, and he actually had a conversation with him in which they traded ideas about black consciousness, but they also made claims that black people were the original Jews and that Jews are very influential in the music industry. All right, and so when I see the situation occurring with Kanye West, I see that the same backlash that Nick Cannon and Professor Griff received was also translated onto Kanye West for making claims about Jewish heritage and the fact that there are several influential Jewish persons in the entertainment industry. And so I believe that they are being saddled with all of this critique because there's been a long-standing bitterness showed towards the black conscious community who have been making claims of the African origin of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, etc. So, family, I hope this was helpful in demystifying some of why Nick Cannon and Kanye West have been attacked in the way that they've been attacked. But let me know your thoughts in the comments below about all these dynamics. One love.